what do you say to the objection that popes throughout history have made some decisions about how the liturgy ought to be celebrated, such as at the Council of Trent, which you can speak of, and so that this is just another such decision? I know that was an interesting point you made earlier about what is the Novus Ordo. We have to figure out what we're talking about, but so therefore the Pope has the authority to do this, and so you might not like it, but you need to get over it.
Sure. There is a view out there that I respect. It's a theological opinion. Well, actually, I don't respect it. I would say that I tolerate it, but it's a view that can be taken and has been taken, that the Pope has nearly unlimited authority and power over the liturgy, and that the only thing that he cannot change is what some people call, in a scholastic vein, the form and matter of the sacraments. So very narrowly speaking, the formula that is required for confecting or effecting a sacrament, along with the proper matter of the sacrament, be it bread or wine or water or oil, that apart from the material objects and from the formulas hallowed by tradition, the Pope can change absolutely anything else he wants. But there's also an opinion that you can find precedent for throughout church history, that the Pope, his job is to be a guardian of tradition, that his job is to be a recipient and a transmitter and a defender of tradition, and that the more he deviates from that, the more he acts ultra vires, that is beyond his powers, outside of the responsibilities of his office. In fact, in a betrayal of his office, right? In a way similar to, if you had a nobleman who owned a castle and a great wealth of land and art and other cultural artifacts and so on, and he just squandered it or burned it, we would say he's a bad steward of the goods that were entrusted to him, the patrimonial goods that were entrusted to him, and he has robbed his children of what was their right to receive. That's how we can think about this situation by analogy. And the reason we can think that way is that all authority, whether it's papal or otherwise, has a certain common structure. All authority is for the sake of the bonum commune, the common good of a society over which the authority is placed. Authority doesn't exist for its own sake, just to sort of bark out commands and make people do stuff. Authority is put in place precisely to govern and guard the common good of a society. So anytime an authority uses his power against the common good of society, that is an abuse of his power, not a proper use of it. Let me give you an example. So a president has his, according to his office, he is supposed to promote the common good of the people. If he implemented laws or policies that were severely prejudicial to any part of the people that he's governing, we would say he's a bad president. And depending upon the nature of those laws, we might even say that they're not laws at all, because they're so contrary to justice that they cease to be laws. I mean, this is a Thomistic principle, right? St. Thomas says that that a law without justice is no law at all, right? A law that does violence to the common good is not a law. So in the liturgical sphere, I can just make one very easy case here. That is to say, right now, as a matter of fact, there are hundreds of vibrant and healthy communities of traditional Catholics around the world for whom worshiping in the traditional rites is a deeply integral and nourishing part of their lives as Catholics. It is why these communities are flourishing. It is why people go to them. It is why there are vocations, religious vocations, why there are so many families starting these communities. If you ask those people, why are you going here? It's not like, oh, it's close to my house. It usually isn't. It's usually an hour away or a half an hour away or in the worst part of town or something like that. They're going there because they've fallen in love with the traditional liturgy of the church. That traditional liturgy cannot ever be seen as not a part of the common good of the church. It's certainly a common good for all of these communities that share it, right? For a pope, therefore, to act directly against that, as Francis did in Traditionis Custodes, is contrary to the nature of his office, and it's outside of his power, ultra vires. That would be the argument I'd make, in short.
But don't you get into a dangerous place where you have to discern whether or not what the Pope is deciding is for the common good or not?
Well, I think that let's put it this way. If you have an authority who's doing his job, then typically you don't have to worry about this. So if you have a father of a family who is, not perfect, not a saint, but is generally acting virtuously the right way, the family rules he's instituted are reasonable, even if they're irksome sometimes, the children and the wife are typically not going to feel the need to examine with a magnifying glass every single rule, every single thing that's said, as if there's like a line item veto, right? And so in general, when an authority is doing its job, the subjects of that authority just roll along with whatever is coming out, And so, if a pope says in 1925, as a pope did, Pius XI, there's a missing gem in the crown of the liturgical calendar. It's the feast of the kingship of our Lord Jesus Christ. So I'm going to put that gem in there. And now everybody on the last Sunday of October, which is what it was, and still is in the traditional calendar, everybody on the last Sunday of October is going to celebrate this proper Mass in honor of the kingship of Christ. Did anybody complain about that? Nobody complained about that. Why would you complain about that? Why not just rejoice and say, this is fantastic. I love the opportunity to venerate the kingship of Christ, and it's a beautiful Mass. Or the Pope says, I have added, I've canonized St. Robert Bellarmine and I've declared him a doctor of the church and his feast day is May 13th. That's also what Pius XI did, all those things. So who's going to complain about that? Nobody's going to complain about that. But if you have a massive and cataclysmic series of changes that deeply disrupt the life of faith on every level, and we have to admit that that's what we're talking about. And anybody who doesn't believe me just needs to take some time to read accounts of what Catholics were thinking and saying in the 60s and 70s. Just read the crushing letters between Evelyn Waugh and Cardinal Heenan. And this is even before the Novus Ordo. This is when all the crazy stuff was happening with the Tridentine Mass in the 1960s. These cries of pain from faithful Catholics for whom the world was being gutted inside out by one raft of changes after another. At this point, it's not looking anymore like, oh, here's a little gem that we're adding to, here's a saint we're putting on the calendar. It's looking like we're throwing out hundreds of years of worship and making you do everything in a totally different way. From one week to the next, Gregorian chant to guitars, Father standing in unity with the people facing eastwards, Father standing over against you, making eye contact with you. These are, if we just think about the magnitude of what we're doing, then we can say, you don't need to have a PhD in political philosophy to recognize this is looking like an assault on the common good of the church. Now, I realize some people are not going to agree with me, but it's a legitimate position to take, and it's not only my position. There are many. I would say this is something that all the classic traditionalist authors said in one form or another, is that this avalanche of changes is harmful. It's harmful to the stability of the church. It's harmful to the faith of the people, to their piety. It's harmful to their family culture. It's harmful to religious life. All of those things you were mentioning earlier, the decline in all of those areas is not unconnected with the crisis in the liturgy, right? So yes, I do very much blame Paul VI for driving all of these things through. The reforms, you cannot possibly change as much as he did in the space of a few years and not expect catastrophic consequences from it. You can't possibly do that.
Thank you very much for watching that Pints with Aquinas clip. If you like it, do me a favor, click like and subscribe, and please offer a Hail Mary for the work of Pints with Aquinas and all the people we're trying to reach. God bless you.